And welcome back, everybody. Let's hope you get all comfy while you listen to some of the worst punishments this Italian man can think of. Let me just switch it over here. We're starting from Canto 24 of the Divine Comedy, Inferno. In that part of the young year when the sun begins to warm its locks beneath Aquarius and night grows shorter, equaling the days, when Hoarfrost mimes the image of his white sister upon the ground, but not for long, because the pen he uses is not sharp. The farmer who is short of fodder rises and looks and sees the fields all white, at which he slaps his thigh, turns back into the house, and here and there complains like some poor wretch who does not know what can be done, and then goes out again and gathers up new hope, on seeing that the world has changed its face in so few hours, and he takes his staff and hurries out his flock of sheep to pasture. Sorry about that. So did my master fill me with dismay when I saw how his brow was deeply troubled. Yet then the plaster soothed the sores quickly. For soon as we were on the broken bridge, my guide turned back to me with that sweet manner at first had seen along the mountain's base, and he examined carefully the ruin. Then, having picked the way we would ascend, he opened up his arms and thrust me forward. And just as he who ponders as he labors, who's always ready for the step ahead, so, as he lifted me up towards the summit, one great crag, he'd see another spur, saying, "That is the one you will grip next, but try it first to see if it's firm." That was no path for those with cloaks of lead, for he and I, he light, I with support, could hardly make it up from spur to spur. And were it not that, down from this enclosure, the slope was shorter than the bank before. I cannot speak for him, but I should surely have been defeated. But since Malebulg runs right into the mouth of its last well, the placement of each valley means it must have one bank high and the other short. And so we reached, at length, the jutting where the last stone of the ruined bridge breaks off. The breath within my lungs was so exhausted from climbing, I could not go on. In fact, as soon as I had reached the stone, I sat. "Now you must cast aside your laziness," my master said, "for he who rests on down or under covers cannot come to fame. And he who spends his life without renown leaves such a vestige of himself on earth as smoke bequeaths to air or foam to water. Therefore, get up, defeat your breathlessness with spirit that can win all battles if the body's heaviness does not deter it. A longer ladder still is to be climbed. It's not enough to have left them behind. If you have understood, I'll profit from it." Then I arose and showed myself far better equipped with breath than I had been before. "Go on, for I am strong and confident." We took our upward way up upon the ridge, with crags more jagged, narrow, difficult, and much more steep than we had crossed before. I spoke as we went on, not to seem weak at this. At this, a voice came from the ditch beyond, a voice that was not suited to form words. I know not what he said, although I was already at the summit of the bridge that crosses there, and yet he seemed to move. I had bent downwards, but my living eyes could not see to the bottom through that dark, at which I said, "Oh, master, can we reach that other belt? Let us descend the wall, for as I hear and cannot understand, so I see down, but can distinguish nothing. The only answer that I give to you is doing it," he said. "A just request is to be met in silence by the act." We then climbed down the bridge just at the end where it runs right into the 8th embankment, and now the moat was plain enough to me. And there within I saw a dreadful swarm of serpents so extravagant in form, remembering them still drains my blood from me. Let Libya boast no more about her sands, for if she breeds Childri, Jaculi, Centris with Amphisbaena, Are she never showed. With all of Ethiopia, or all that land that borders the Red Sea, so many such malignant pestilences. Among this cruel and depressing swarm ran people who were naked, terrified, with no hope of a hole nor heliotrope. Their hands were tied behind by serpents. These had thrust their head and tail right through their loins, and then were knotted on the other side. And there! A serpent sprang with force at one who stood upon our shore, transfixing him, just where the neck and shoulders form a knot. No O or I had ever been transcribed so quickly as that soul caught fire and burned, and, as he fell, completely turned to ashes. And when he lay, undone, upon the ground, the dust of him collected by itself and instantly returned to what it was. Just so, it is asserted by the great sages. Just when it reached its 500th year, the phoenix dies and then is born again. Lifelong, it never feeds on grass or grain, only on drops of incense and ammonium. Its final winding sheets are nard and myrrh. And just as he who falls and knows not how, by demon's force that drags him to the ground, or by some other hindrance that binds man, who, when he rises, stares about him, all bewildered by the heavy anguish he had suffered, sighing as he looks around. So did the sinner stare when he arose. Oh, how severe it is, the power of God, that, as its vengeance, showers down such blows. My guide then asked that sinner who he was. To this he answered, "Not long since I reined from Tuscany into this savage maw. Mule that I was, the bestial life pleased me, and not the human. I am Vanni Fucci, beast, and the den that suited me, Pistoia. And I to Virgil, tell him not to slip away, and ask what sin he has thrust him here, and who am as a man of blood and anger." The sinner heard and did not try to feign, turned his mind and face, intent, towards me, and coloring with miserable shame. He said, "I suffer more because you've caught me in this, the misery you see, than I suffered when taken from the other life. I can't refuse to answer what you ask. I am set down so far because I robbed the sacristy of its fair ornaments. And someone else was falsely blamed for that. But lest this sight give you too much delight, if you can ever leave these lands of darkness, open your ears to my announcement. Here, Pistoia first will strip herself on blacks, then Florence will renew her men and manners. From Val de Magra, Mars will draw upon a vapor which turbid clouds will try to wrap. Clash between them will be fierce, impetuous, a tempest fought upon the Campo Pequeno, until that vapor, vigorous, shall crack the mist, and every wight be struck by it. And I have told you this to make you grieve." Canto 25, Inferno. When he had finished with his words, the thief raised high his fist with both figs cocked and cried, "Take that, O God! I square them off for you." From that time on, those serpents were my friends, for one of them coiled then around his neck, as if to say, "I'll have you speak no more." Another wound about his arms and bound him again and wrapped itself in front so firmly that he could not even make them budge an inch. Pistoia, Pistoia, must you last? Why not decree your self-incineration, since you surpass your seed in wickedness? Throughout the shadowed circles of deep hell, I saw no soul against God so rebel, not even he who fell from the Theban walls. He fled and could not say another word. Then I saw a centaur, full of anger, shouting, "Where is he? Where is that bitter one?" I don't think Maremma had the number of snakes that Centaur carried on his haunch till the part of him that takes our human form. Upon his shoulders, behind his nape, there lay a dragon with its wings outstretched. It sets ablaze all of those it intercepts. My master said that Centaur there is Cassis, who often made a lake of blood within a grotto underneath Mount Aventine. He does not ride the same road as his brothers because he stole, and most deceitfully, from the great herd nearby. His crooked deeds ended beneath the cup of Heracles, who may not have given him 100 blows, but he was not alive to feel the 10th. While he was talking so, Casus ran by, and just beneath our ledge, 3 souls arrived. But neither I nor my guide noticed them until they had cried out, "And who are you?" At this the words we shared were interrupted, and we attended only to those spirits. I did not recognize them, but it happened, as chance will usually bring about, that one of them called out the other's name, exclaiming, "Where was Sianfa left behind?" At this, so my guide might be alert, I raised my finger up from chin to nose. If, reader, you are slow now to believe what I shall tell, that is no cause for wonder, for I, who saw it, hardly can accept it. As I kept my eyes fixed upon those sinners, a serpent with 6 feet springs out against one of the 3, and clutches him completely. It gripped his belly with its middle feet, and with its 4 feet grappled his 2 arms, and then it sank its teeth in both of his cheeks. It stretched his rear feet along his thighs, and ran its tail along between the 2, then strengthened it again behind his loins. No ivy ever gripped a tree so fast as when that horrifying monster clasped and intertwined the other's limbs with his. Then, just as if their substance were warm wax, they stuck together, and they mixed their colors so neither seemed what he had seen before, what had been before. Just as, when paper is kindled, where it still had not caught flame in full, its colors dark, though not yet black, while white is dying off. The other 2 souls stared, and each one cried, "Ah me, Agnello, how you change. Just see, you are already neither 2 nor 1. And 2 heads were already joined in one, when in one face where 2 had been dissolved, 2 intermingled shapes appeared before us. 2 arms came into being from 4 lengths. The thighs and legs, the belly and the chest became such limbs as never had been seen. And every former shape was cancelled there. That perverse image seemed to share in both and none, and so, and slowly, it moved on. Just as the lizard, when it darts from hedge to hedge beneath the dog day's giant lash, seems as if it crossed one's path, a lightning flash, so seemed a blazing little serpent moving against the bellies of the other 2, as black and livid as a peppercorn. Attacking one of them, it pierced right through the part where we first take our nourishment, and then it fell before him at full length. The one it had transfixed stared, but said nothing. In fact, he only stood his ground and yawned, as one who'd sleep or fever has undone. The serpent stared at him, he at the serpent. One through his wound, the other through his mouth, were smoking violently. Their smoke met. Let Lucan now be silent where he sings of Sabelus and Acidius, and wait to hear what flies off from my bow. Let Ovid now be silent where he tells of Cadmus, Arthusa, if his verse had made of one a serpent, one a fountain. I do not envy him. He never did transmute 2 natures face to face, so that both forms were ready to exchange their matter. These were the ways they answered to each other. The serpent split its tail into a fork. The wounded sinner drew his steps together. The legs and then the thighs along with them, so fastened to each other at the juncture, soon left no sign that was discernible. Meanwhile, the cleft tail took upon itself the form the other gradually lost. Its skin grew soft. The other's skin grew hard. I saw the arms that drew in at his armpits, and also saw the monster's 2 short feet grew long for just as much as those were shortened. The serpent's hind feet twisted up together, became the member that man hides, just as the wretch put out 2 hind paws from his member. And while the smoke veils each with a new color, and now breeds hair upon the skin of one, just as it strips the hair off from the other. The one rose up, the other fell, and yet they never turned aside their impious eye lamps, beneath which each of them transformed his snout. He who stood up drew his back towards his temples, and from the excess matter growing there came ears upon the cheeks that had been bare. Whatever had not been pulled back but kept superfluous, then made his face a nose and thickened out his lips appropriately. He who was lying down thrust out his snout, and even as the snail howls in its horns, he drew his ears straight back into his head. His tongue, which had before been whole and fit for speech, now cleaves. The other's tongue, which had been forked, now closes up, and the smoke stops. The soul that had become an animal, now hissing, hurried off along the valley. The other one, behind him, speaks and spits. And then he turned aside his new-made shoulders and told the third soul, I'd have Buswo run on all 4s down this road, as I have done. And so I saw the 7th ballast change and rearrange. May the strangeness plead for me, if there had been some confusion in my pen. And through my eyes were somewhat blurred, my mind bewildered. Those 3 sinners did not flee so secretly that I could not perceive. Uchiyo Canto clearly, he who was the only soul who had not been changed among the 3 companions we had met at first. The other made you, Gaviel, grieve. Canto 26. Inferno. Be joyous, Florence, you are great indeed, for over sea and land you beat your wings, through every part of hell your name extends. Among the thieves I found 5 citizens of yours, and such that shame has taken me. With them you can ascend to no high honor. But if the dreams dreamt close to dawn are true, then little time will pass before you feel what Prato and the others crave for you. Were that already come, it would not be too soon, and let it come, since it must be. As I grow older, it will be more heavy. We left that deep end by protruding stones that served as stairs for our descent before. My guide clambered up again and drew me forward. And as we took our solitary path among the ridge's jagged spurs and rocks, our feet could not make way without our hands. It grieved me then, and now grieves me again when I direct my mind to what I saw. And more than usual, I curb my talent. Had it not run where virtue does not guide, so that if my kind star or something better has given me that gift, I not abuse it. As many as the firefly is the peasant, while resting on a hillside in the season, when he who lights the world least hides his face. Just when the fly gives way to the mosquito, sees glimmering below, down in the valley, that where perhaps he gathers grapes and tills. So many were the flames that glittered in the 8th abyss. I made this out as soon as I had come to where one sees the bottom, even as he who was avenged by bears saw, as it left, Elijah's chariot, its horses rearing, rising right to heaven, when he could not keep track of it except by watching one lone flame in its ascent, just like a little cloud that climbs on high. So, through the gullet of that ditch each flame must make its way. No flame displays its prey, though every flame has carried off a sinner. I stood upon the bridge and leaned straight out to sea, and if I had not gripped a rock, I should have fallen off without a bush. My guide, who noted how intent I was, told me, "Within those fires there are souls. Each one is swathed in that which scorches him." "My master," I replied, "on hearing you, I am more sure, but I had already thought that it was so, and I had meant to ask, who is within that flame that comes so twinned above that would seem to rise out of the pyre Eteocles shared with his brother?" He answered me, "Within that flames Ulysses and Diomedes suffer. They who went as one to rage now share one punishment. And there, together in their flame, they grieve over their house's fraud that caused a breach, the gate that let Rome's noble seed escape. There they regret the guile that mates the dead Deidaima, still lament Achilles, and there, for the Palladium, they pray. If they can speak within those sparks," I said, "I pray you, and re-pray, and, Master, may my prayer be worth 1,000 pleas. Do not forbid my waiting here until the flame with horns approaches us, for you can see how, out of my desire, I bend towards it. And he to me, what you have asked is worthy of every praise. Therefore, I favor it. I only ask you this, refrain from talking. Let me address them. I have understood what you desire of them. Since they were Greek, perhaps they'd be disdainful of your speech." And when my guide adjudged the flame had reached a point where time and place were opportune, this was the form I heard his words assume. "You too, who moves as one within the flame, if I've deserved of you while I still lived, if I've deserved of you much or little, when in the world I wrote my noble lines, do not move on. Let one of you retell where, having gone astray, he found his death." The greater horn within that ancient flame began to sway and tremble, murmuring, just like a fire that struggles in the wind, and then he waved his flame tip back and forth, as if it were a tongue that tried to speak, and flung towards us a voice that answered. "When I'd sailed away from Circe, who beguiled me to stay more than a year there, near Gaeta, before Aeneas gave that place a name, neither my fondness for my son, nor pity for my old father, nor the love I owed Penelope, which would have gladdened her, was able to defeat in me the longing I had to gain experience of the world, and of the vices and the worth of men. Therefore I set out on the open sea, with but one ship and that small company of those who never had deserted me. I saw as far as Spain, as far as Morocco along both shores. I saw Sardinia, and saw the other islands that sea bathes. And my companions were already old and slow when we approached the narrows where Heracles set up his boundary stones, that men might heed and never reach beyond. Upon my right, I had gone past Seville, and on the left, already past Ceuta. Brothers, I said, O you who, having crossed 100,000 dangers, reach the west, to this brief waking time that's still left unto your senses, to this brief waking time that is still left unto your senses, you must not deny experience of that which lies beyond the sun, and of the world that is unpeopled. Consider well the seed that gave you its birth. You were not made to live your lives as brutes, but to be followers of worth and knowledge. I spurred my comrades with this belief, addressed to meet the journey with such eagerness that I could hardly, then, have held them back. And having turned our stern toward morning, we made our wings out of oars in a wild flight, and always gained upon our left-hand side. At night, I now could see the other pole and all its stars. The star of ours had fallen, and never rose above the plane of the ocean. 5 times the light beneath the moon had been rekindled, and as many times was spent since that hard passage faced our first attempt, when there before us rose a mountain, dark because of distance, and it seemed to me the highest mountain I had ever seen. And we were glad. But this soon turned to sorrow, for For out of that new land a whirlwind rose and hammered at our ship against her bow. 3 times it turned her round with all of the waters, and at the 4th it lifted up the stern, so that our prow plunged deep, as pleased as another, until the sea again closed over us. Canto 27, Inferno. The flame was already erect and silent. It had no more to say. Now it had left us with the permission of the gentle poet, when, just behind it, came another flame that drew our eyes to watch its tip because of the perplexing sound that it sent forth. Even as the Sicilian bull, that first had bellowed with the cry, and this was just of him who shaped it with its instruments, would always bellow with its victim's voice, so that, although that bull was only brass, it seemed as if it were pierced through by pain. It seemed as if it were pierced through by pain. So were the helpless words that, from the first, had found no path or exit from the flame, transformed into the language of the fire. But after they had found their way up towards the tip, and given that moment which the tongue had been given them along their passage, we heard, "O you to whom I turn my voice, who only now were talking Lombard, saying, now you may leave. I'll not provoke more speech, though I have come perhaps a little late. May I not trouble you to stop and speak with me? See how I stay, and I am burning. You had fallen into this blind world, but recently out of the sweet Italian country from which I carry all my guilt. Do tell me if the Romagnols have peace or war. I was from there, the hills between Urbino and the ridge where the Tiber springs. I was still bent, attentive over him, when my guide nudged me lightly at the side and said, "You speak. He is Italian." And I, who had my answers set already, without delay began to speak to him. O soul that is concealed below in flame, Romagna is not now and never was quite free of war inside its tyrants' hearts. When I left her, none had broken out. Ravenna stands as it has stood for years. The eagle of the Polenta shelters it and also covers Servia with its wings. The city that already stood long trial and made a bloody heap out of the French now finds itself again beneath green paws. Both mastiffs of Verruccio, old and new, who dealt so badly with Montagna, used their teeth to bore where they have always gnawed. The cities on the Mone and Santerno are led by the young lion of the White Lyre. From summer unto winter he shifts factions. That city with its side bathed by the Savio, just as it lies between the plain and mountain, lives somewhere between tyranny and freedom. And now I pray you, tell me who you are. Do not be harder than I've been with you, that in the world your name may still endure." After the flame, in customary fashion, had roared a while, it moved its tip, this side and that side, and then set free its breath. If I thought my reply were meant for one who ever could return into the world, this flame would stir no more. And yet, since none, if what I hear is true, ever returned alive from this abyss, then without fear of facing infamy, I answer you. I was a man of arms, then wore the cord, believing that, so girt, I made amends. And surely what I thought would have been true had not the high and surely what I thought would have been true had not the highest priest, may he be damned, made me fall back into my former sins. And how and why I'd have you hear from me. While I still had the form of bones and flesh my mother gave to me, my deeds were not those of the lion, but those of the fox. The wiles and secret ways, I knew them all, and so employed their arts that my renown had reached the very boundaries of earth. When I saw myself come to that part of life when it is fitting for all men to lower sails and gather in their ropes, what once had been my joy was now dejection, repenting and confessing. I became a friar, and, poor me, it would have helped. The prince of the new Pharisees, who then was waging war so near the Lateran, and not against the Jews or Saracens, for every enemy of his was Christian, and none of them had gone to conquer Acre or had been a traitor in the Sultan lands. Took no care for the highest office or the holy orders that were his, or for my cord, which used to make its wearers leaner. But just as Constantine, on Mount Socrates, to cure his leprosy, sought out Sylvester, so this one sought me out as his instructor. To ease the fever of his arrogance, he asked me to give counsel. I was silent. His words had seemed to me delirious. And then he said, "Your heart must not mistrust. I now absolve you in advance. Teach Mev to better Palestrino to the ground. You surely know that I possess the power to lock and unlock heaven, for the keys my predecessor did not prize are true." Then his grave arguments compelled me so. My silence seemed a worse offense than speech, and I said, "Since you cleanse me of the sin that I must now fall into, Father, no. Long promises and very brief fulfillments will bring a victory to your high throne." Then Francis came, and soon as I was dead, for me, but one of the black cherubim told him, "Do not bear him off. Do not cheat me. He must come down among my menials." The counsel that he gave was fraudulent. Since then I kept close track to snatch his scalp. One can't absolve a man who's not repented, and no one can repent and will at once. The law of contradiction won't allow it. Oh, miserable me, for how I started when he took a hold of me and said, "Perhaps you did not think that I was a logician." He carried me to Minos, and that monster twisted his tail 8 times around his hide, and then, when he had bit it in great anger, announced, "This one is for the thieving fire, for which, and where, you see, I am now lost. And in this garb I move in bitterness." And when with this his words were at an end, flame departed, sorrowing and writhing, and tossing its sharp horn, we moved beyond. I went together with my guide along the ridge until the other arch that bridges the ditch where payment is opposed on those who, since they brought such discord, bear such loads. Canto 28, Inferno. Who, even with untrammeled words and many attempts at telling, could ever recount in full blood and wounds that I now saw? Each tongue that tried would certainly fall short, because the shallowness of both our speech and intellect cannot contain so much. Were you to reassemble all the men who once, within Apulia's faithful land, had mourned their blood shed at the Trojans' hands, as well as those who fell in the long war, where massive mounds of rings were battle spoils, even as Livy writes, who does not err, and those who felt the thrust of painful blows when they'd fought against Robert Guiscard, with all of the rest whose bones are still piled up. At Separano, each Apulian was a traitor there, and, too, at Tagliacozzo, where old Arlon Alardo conquered without weapons, and then where one to show his limb pierced through and one his limb hacked off, that would not match the hideousness of the ninth abyss. No barrel, even though it's lost a hoop or end piece. No barrel, even though it's lost a hoop or end piece, ever gapes as one whom I saw ripped right from his chin to where we fart. His bowels hung between his legs. One saw his vitals and the miserable sack that makes of what we swallow excrement. While I was all intent on watching him, he looked at me, and with his hands he spread his chest, said, "See how I split myself. See now how maimed Muhammad is. And he who walks and weeps before me is Ali, whose face is opened wide from chin to forelock, and all the others whom you can see where, when alive, are the sores of dissension and scandal. And for this they are now split. Behind us here a devil decks us out so cruelly, replacing every one of his throng underneath the sword edge when we've made our way around the road of pain. Because our wounds have closed again before, we have returned to meet his blade once more. But who are you to dawdle on this ridge? Perhaps to slow your going to the verdict that was pronounced on your self-accusations? And death has not reached him yet, my master answered. Nor is it guilt that summons him to torment, but that he may gain full experience. I, who am dead, must guide him here below, to circle after circle, throughout hell. This is as true as that I speak to you. More than 100, when they'd heard him, stopped within that ditch and turned to look at me, forgetful of their torture, wondering. Then you, who will perhaps soon see the sun, tell Fra Docino to provide himself with food. He has no desire to join me. Here quickly, lest when snow besieges him. It bring the Novarese the victory that otherwise they would not find so easily. Thank you for the follow. When he had raised his heel as if to go, Muhammad said these words to me, and then he set it on the ground, and off he went. Another sinner with his throat slit through, and with his nose hacked off up to his eyebrows, and no more than a single ear remaining, had, with the others, stayed his steps in wonder. He was the first, before the rest, to open his windpipe on the outside, all blood red, and said, "O you whom guilt does not condemn, and whom, unless too close resemblance cheats me, I have seen above upon Italian soil. Remember Pier de Medicina, if you ever see again the gentle plain that from Vercelli slopes to Marcabo. And let the two best men of Fano know, I mean both Messer Guido and Angiolello, that if the foresight we have here is not vain, they will be cast out of their ship and drowned, weighed down with stones, near Catalicia, because of a foul tyrant's treachery. Between the Isles of Cyprus and Majorca, Neptune has never seen so cruel a crime committed by the pirates of the Argives. That traitor who sees only with one eye and rules the land with one which one who with and rules the land which one who's here with me would wish his sight had never seen. We'll call Guido and Angiolello to a parley, and then so we'll arrange it that they'll need no vow or prayer to Volcara's wind. And I to him, if you would have me carry some news of you above, then tell and show me who so detests the sight of Rimini. And then he set his hand upon the jaw of a companion, opening his mouth and shouting, "This is he, and he speaks not." A man cast out, he quenched the doubt in Caesar, insisting that the one who is prepared can only suffer harm if he delays. Oh, how dismayed and pained he seemed to me, his tongue slit in his gullet, Curio, who once was so audacious in his talk, and one who walked with both his hands hacked off, while lifting up his stumps through the dark air so that his face was hideous with blood, cried out, "You will remember Mosca too, who said, 'Alas, what's done is at an end,' which was the seed of evil for the Tuscans." I added, "And brought death to your own kinsmen," and having heard me speak, grief heaped upon grief. He went his way as one gone mad with sadness. But I stayed there to watch the company, and saw that a thing that I should been afraid to tell with no more proof than my own self. Except that I am reassured by conscience, that good companion, heartening a man beneath the breastplate of his purity. I surely saw, and it still seems I see, a trunk without a head that walked just like the others in that melancholy herd. It carried by the hair its severed head, which swayed within its hand just like a lantern, and that head looked at us and said, "Ah, me." Out of itself it made itself into a lamp, and they were 2 in 1, and 1 in 2. How can that be? He knows who so decrees. When it was just below the bridge, it lifted its arm together with its head, so that its words might be more near us. Words that said, "Now you can see atrocious punishment. You who, still breathing, go to view the dead. See if there is any pain as great as this. And so that you may carry news of me, know that I am Bertrand de Born, the one who gave bad counsel to the fledgling king. I made the son and father enemies. Architophel, with his malicious urgings, did not do worse with Absalom and David. Because I severed those so joined, I carry, alas, my brain dissevered from its source, which is within my trunk, and thus, in me, one sees the law of counter penalty. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoy it. I hope you can relax while hearing me read off descriptions of people being split in half and severed heads being carried by headless bodies. This story's wild, yo. Canto 29, Inferno. So many souls and such outlandish wounds had made my eyes inebriate. They longed to stay and weep, but Virgil said to me, "Why are you staring so insistently? Why does your vision linger there below, among the lost and mutilated shadows? You did not do so at the other moats. If you would count them all, consider. 22 miles make up the circuit of the valley. The moon already is beneath our feet. The time allotted to us now is short. And there is more to see than you see here. Had you," I answered him without a pause, "been able to consider why I looked, you might have granted me a longer stay." Meanwhile, my guide had moved ahead. I went behind him, answering as I walked on, and adding, "In that hollow upon which just now I kept my eyes intent. I think a spirit born of my own blood laments the guilt which, down below, costs one so much. At this my master said, "Don't let your thoughts about him interrupt you from here on. Attend to other things. Let him stay there." For I saw him below the little bridge, his finger pointing at you, threatening, and heard him called by the name Gary de Bello. Yeah, please forgive me for any and all Italian names and locations. I'm trying to play this by ear. But at that moment you were occupied with him who once was the Lord of Hautefort. You did not notice Gary. He moved off. My guide, it was his death by violence for which he had still not avenged, I said. By anyone who shares his shame. That made him so disdainful now, and I suppose, for this he left without a word to me. And this had made me pity him the more. And so we talked until we found the first point of the ridge that, if there were more light, would show the other valley to the bottom. When we had climbed above the final cloister of Maelbolg, so that its lay brothers were able to appear before our eyes, I felt the force of strange laments, like arrows whose shafts are barbed with pity, and at this I had to place my hands across my ears. Just like the sufferings that all the sick of Valdichiana's hospitals, Marima's Sardinas, from July until September would muster if assembled in one ditch, so was it here, and such a stench rose up as usually comes from festering limbs. And keeping always to the left, we climbed down the final bank of the long ridge, and then my sight could see more vividly into the bottom, where unerring justice, the minister of the High Lord, punishes the falsifier she had registered. I do not think that there was greater grief in seeing all of Aeginia's people sick. Then, when the air was so infected that all animals, down to the little worm, collapsed, and afterwards, as poets hold to be certain truth, those ancient peoples received their health again through seed of ants. Then I felt when I saw, in the dark valley, spirits languishing in scattered heaps. Some lay upon their bellies, some lay upon the shoulders of another spirit. Some crawled on all fours along that squalid road. We journeyed step by step without a word, watching and listening to those sick souls who had not strength enough to lift themselves. I saw two sitting, propped against each other, as a pan is propped on pan to heat them up, and each, from head to foot, spotted with scabs. And I have never seen a stable boy whose master waits for him, or one who stays awake reluctantly, so ply a horse with curry comb. As they assailed themselves with clawing nails, their itching had such force and fury, and there was no other help. And so their nails kept scraping off the scabs, just as knife scrapes off the scalps of carp or another fish, with scales more large. "Oh, you who use your nails to strip yourself," my guide began to say to one of them, "and sometimes have turned them into pincers. Tell us if there are some Italians among the sinners in this moat, so may your nails hold out eternal at their work." "We too, whom you see so disfigured here, we are Italians," one said in tears. "But who are you who have inquired of us?" My guide replied, "From circle down to circle, together with this living man, I am one who descends. I mean to show him hell." At this their mutual support broke off, and, quivering, each spirit turned towards me, with others who, by chance, had heard his words. Then my good master drew more close to me, saying, "Now tell them what it is you want." And I began to speak, just as he had wished. "So that your memory may never fade within the first world from the minds of men, but still live on, and under many suns, do tell me who you are, and from which city." and do not let your vile and filthy torment make you afraid to let me know your names. One answered me, my city was Arezzo, and Albero of Siena had me burned. But what I died for does not bring me here. It is true that I had told him, jestingly, I knew enough to fly through air, and he, with curiosity, but little sense, wished me to show that art to him. And just because I had not made him Daedalus, had one who'd held him as a son burdened me. But Minos, who could not mistake, condemned my spirit to the final pouch of 10 for alchemy I practiced in the world. And then I asked the poet, was there ever so vain a people as the Sienese? Even the French can't match such vanity. At this, the other leper who had heard me replied to what I said, except for Stricca, for he knew how to spend most frugally. And Nicolo, the first to make men see that clothes can serve as luxury. Such seed in gardens where it suits can take fast root. And 2, Casia de Asciano Company, with whom he squandered vineyards and tilled fields with Abagliato showed such subtlety. But if you want to know who joined you so against the Sienese, look hard at me. That way my face can also answer rightly. And see that I am the shade of that Capocchio, whose alchemy could counterfeit fine metals, and you, if I correctly take your measure, recall how apt that I was aping nature. Alright. I'll be back in a few minutes. I need to take a bio break. Shouldn't take too long. Sit tight. I appreciate your patience. Canto 30, Inferno. When Juno was incensed with Semele, and thus against the Theban family, had shown her fury time and time again, then Athamas was driven so insane that, seeing both his wife and their 2 sons, as she bore one upon each arm, he cried, "Let's spread the nets to take the lioness together with her cubs along the pass." And he stretched out his talons, pitiless, and snatched the son who bore the name Learchus, whirled him around and dashed him on the rock. She, with her other burden, drowned herself, and after fortune turned against the pride of Troy, which dared all, so that the king, together with his kingdom, was destroyed. Then Hecuba was wretched, sad, a captive, and after she had seen Polyxena, After she had seen Polyxena dead and in misery had recognized her Polydorus lying on the shore, she barked out of her senses like a dog. Her agony had so deformed her mind, but neither Fury, Theban, Trojan, ever was seen to be so cruel against another in rending beasts and even human limbs, as were the two shades I saw, both pale and naked, who, biting, ran berserk in just the way a hog does when let loose from its sty. The one time at Capocchio, and sank his tusk into his neck so that, by dragging, he made the hard ground scrape against his belly. And he who stayed behind, the Aretine, trembled and said, "That phantom's Gianni Schicchi." And he goes raging, rending the others so. And I said, "Oh." And, "Oh," I said to him, "so may the other not sink its teeth into you. Please tell me who it is before it hurries off from there." And he said to me, "That is the ancient soul of the indecent Mira. That is the ancient soul of the indecent Mira. She who loved her father past the limits of just love. She came to sin with him by falsely taking another shape upon herself, just as the other phantom who goes there had done, that he might gain the lady of the herd, when he disguised himself as Busuo Donati, making a will as if most properly. And when the pair of raging ones had passed, those two on whom my eyes were fixed, I turned around to see the rest of the ill-born. I saw one who'd be fashioned like a lute, if he had only his groin cut off from that part of his body where it forks, the heavy dropsy, which so disproportions the limbs with unassimilated humors, that there's no match between the face and belly. He had made him part his lips like a consumptive, who will, because of thirst, let one lip drop down in his chin and lift the other up. "Oh, you exempt from every punishment in this grim world, and I do not know why," he said to us. "Look now and pay attention to this, the misery of Master Adam, alive. I had had enough of all I'd wanted. Alas, I now long for one drop of water. The rivulets that fall into the Arno, down from the green hills of the Casentino, which channels cools and moist, are constantly before me. I am racked by memory. The image of their flow parches me more than disease that robs my face of flesh." You came in on a little bit of Dante's Inferno. Having a bit of a reading of some neat little public domain works. We're currently on the 10th Bolgia of the 8th Circle of Hell. So you come onto the, I believe it's the alchemizers. The people who did alchemy. Well, it's not the people who did alchemy, it's the people who could fake that they could do alchemy. The rigid justice that would torment me uses, as most appropriate, the place where I had sinned, to draw swift sighs from me. There is Romena. There I counterfeited the currency that bears the Baptist seal. For this I left my body, burned above. But could I see the miserable souls of Guido, Alessandro, or their brother, I'd not give up the sight for Fonte Branda, and one of them is in this moat already. If what the angry shades report is true, what use is that to me, whose limbs are tied? Were I so light that, in 100 years, I could advance an inch, I should already be well upon the road to search for him. Among the mutilated ones, although this circuit measures some 11 miles, and is of at least half a mile across. Because of them, I'm in this family. It was those three who had incited me to coin the florins with 3 carats dross. And I to him Who are those two poor sinners who give off smoke like wet hands in the winter and lies so close to you upon the right?" "I found 'em here," he answered. "When I rained down to this rocky slope, they've not stirred since and will not move, I think, eternally. One is the lying woman who blamed Joseph, the other, lying Sinon, Greek from Troy, because of raging fever they reek so. And one of them, who seemed to take offense, perhaps at being named so squalidly, struck with his fist at Adam's rigid belly. It sounded as if it had been a drum. And Master Adam struck him in the face, using his arm, which did not seem less hard, saying to him, 'Although I cannot move my limbs because they are too heavy, I still have an arm that's free to serve that need.' And he replied, 'But when you went to burning, your arm was not as quick as it was now. Though when you coined, it was as quick and more.' To which the dropsied one, 'Here you speak true, but you were not so true a witness there, when you were asked to tell the truth at Troy.' 'If I spoke false, you falsified the coin,' said Sinon. 'I am here for just one crime, but you've committed more than any demon.' 'Do not forget the horse, you perjurer,' replied the one who had... Oh, don't you forget about that horse. 'Don't forget the horse, you perjurer,' replied the one who had the bloated belly. 'May you be plagued because the whole world knows it. The Greek, and you be plagued by the thirst that cracks your tongue, and putrid water that had made your belly such a hedge before your eyes. And then the coiner. So, as usual, your mouth, because of racking fever, gapes. For if I thirst, and if my humor bloats me, you have both dryness and a head that aches. Few words would be sufficient invitation to have you lick the mirror of Narcissus.' I was intent on listening to them, when this was what my master said. 'If you insist on looking more, I'll quarrel with you.' And when I heard him speak so angrily, I turned around to him with such with shame so great that it still stirs within my memory. Even as one who dreams that he is harmed, and, dreaming, wishes he were dreaming, thus desiring that which is, as if it were not, so I became within my speechlessness. I wanted to excuse myself, and did excuse myself, although I knew it not. Lest shame would wash away a greater fault than was your fault, my master said to me. Therefore, release yourself from all remorse, and see that I am always at your side. Should it so happen once again, that fortune brings you where men would quarrel in this fashion, to want to hear such bickering is base. We're almost done. There's only like 4 more cantos. We've almost escaped hell. Canto 31, Inferno. The very tongue that first had wounded me, sending the color up in both my cheeks, was then to cure me with his medicine, as did Achilles in his father's lance. Even as I have heard, when it dispensed a sad stroke first, and then a healing one. We turned our backs upon that dismal valley. By climbing up the bank that girdles it, we made our way across without a word. Here it was less than night and less than day, so that my sight could only move ahead slightly. But then I heard a bugle blast so strong, it would have made a thunderclap seem faint. At this, my eyes, which double back upon the path, turned fully towards one place. Not even Roland's horn, which followed on the sad defeat when Charlemagne had lost his holy army, was as dread as this. I had only turned my head there briefly when I seemed to make out many high towers. Then I asked him, "Master, tell me, what's this city?" And he to me, "It is because you try to penetrate from afar into these shadows that you have formed such faulty images. When you have reached that place, you shall see clearly how much the distance has deceived your sense, and therefore let this spur you on your way." Then lovingly he took me by the hand and said, "Before we have moved further on, so that fact may seem less strange to you, I'll have you know that they are not towers, but giants. And from the navel downward, all of them are in the central pit at the embankment. Just as whatever mists begin to thin, when gradually vision finds the form that in the vapor, thickened air was hidden. So I pierced through the dense and darkened fog as I drew always nearer to the shore. My error fled from me, my terror grew. Whereas on its round wall, Monte Regione, it's crowned with towers, so there, towered here, above the bank that runs around the pit. With half their bulk, the terrifying giants with whom Jove still menaces from heaven, and he sends his bolt of thunder down upon them. And I can now make out the face of one, his shoulders and his chest, much of his belly and both his arms hung at the sides. Surely when she gave up the art of making such creatures, nature acted well indeed, depriving Mars of instruments like these. And if she still produces elephants and whales, whoever sees with subtlety holds her, for this, to be more just and prudent. For where the mind's acutest reasoning is joined to evil will and evil power, there human beings can't defend himself. His face appeared to me as broad and long as Rome can claim for its St. Peter's pine core. His other bones shared in that same proportion, so that the bank, which served him as an apron down from his middle, showed so much of him above that 3 Frieslanders would in vain have boasted of their reaching to his hair. For downward from the place where one would buckle a mantle, I saw 30 spans of him. What do you think? I'm doing the ASMR stream right now. I'm doing an ASMR reading. It's just a little, macabre. Raphael, my amice zabi ami almi, began to bellow that brute's mouth for which no sweeter psalms would be appropriate. And my guide turned to him. "Oh, stupid soul, keep to your horn and use that as an outlet for a rage or other passion touches you. Look at your neck and you will find the strap that holds it fast, and see, bewildered spirit, how it lies straight across your massive chest. And then to me, he is his own accuser, for this is Nimrod, through whose wicked thought one single language cannot serve the world. Leave him alone. Let's not waste time in talk, for every language is to him the same as his to others. No one knows the tongue." Nimrod is kind of fascinating. He was one of the giants who tried to build the Tower of Babel, but when God struck it down, he made everybody speak a different language. Originally, everybody just spoke one language, but when they tried to build the Tower of Babel, God did not like that, and so he broke it, and they also made everybody speak different languages. So, turning to the left, we journeyed on, and at the distance of a bow shot, found another giant, far more huge and fierce. Who was the master who had tied him so, I cannot say, but his left arm was bent behind him, and his right was bent in the front, both pinioned by a chain that held him tight down from the neck and round the part of him that was exposed. It would have been wound 5 times. This giant in his arrogance had tested his force against the force of highest Jove. My guide had said, so he merits this reward. His name is Ephialtes, and he showed tremendous power when the giants frightened the gods. The arms he moved now move no more. And I to him, if it is possible, I'd like my eyes to have experience of the enormous one. Briareus. At which he answered, You shall see Antaeus nearby. He is unfettered and can speak. He will take us to the bottom of all evil. The one who you wish to see lies far beyond, and is bound up is just as huge as this one, and even more ferocious in his gaze. No earthquake was ever so violent when he had called to shake a tower so robust as Ephialtes quick to shake himself. Then I was more afraid of death than ever. That fear would have been quite enough to kill me, had I not seen how he was held by chains. And we continued on until we reached Antaeus, who, not reckoning his head, stood out above the rock wall for 5 full ells. Oh, you who had lived within the famous valley where Scipico became their heir of glory, when Hannibal retreated with his men, who took 1,000 lions as your prey, and had you been together with your brothers in the high war, it seems some still believed the sons of the earth would have become the victors. Do set us down below, where cold shunts in Coctus. Do not disdain that task. Don't send us down onto Titus, or Typhoon. This man can give you what is longed for here. Therefore bend down, do not curl your lip. He can still breathe fame. He can still bring fame within the world, for he is alive, and still expects long life, unless grace summon him before his time. So said my master, and in haste, Antaeus stretched out his hands, whose massive grip had once been felt by Hercules, had grasped my guide. Yeah, thank you for the follow. And Virgil, when he had felt himself caught up, called out to me, "Come here, so I can hold you," then made one bundle of himself and me. Just as the Garisenda seems when seen beneath the leaning side, when clouds run past and it hangs down as if about to crash, so did Antaeus seem to me as I watched him bend over me. A moment when I'd preferred to take some other road, but gently, on the deep that swallows up both Lucifer and Judas, he placed us. Nor did he, so bent over, stay there long, but like a mast above a ship, he rose. Yeah, search history, thank you. Mommy Lol, so thank you for the follow. Don't mind me, just doing a little stretch. Canto 32, Inferno. Had I the crude and scrannel rhymes to suit the melancholy whole upon which all the other circling crags converge and rest, the juice of my conception would be pressed more fully. But because I fear their lack, I bring myself to speak, yet speak in fear. For it is not a task to take in jest, to show the base of all the universe, nor for a tongue that cries out, "Mama, Papa." But may those ladies now sustain my verse, who helped Amphion when he walled up Thebes, so that my tale not differ from the fact. O rabble, miscreated past all others, there in the place of which it is hard to speak. Better if here you had been goats or sheep. When we were down below in the dark well, beneath the giant's feet, and lower yet, with my eyes still upon the steep embankment, I heard this said to me, "Watch how you pass. Walk, so that you not trample with your souls the head of your exhausted, wretched brothers." At this I turned and saw in front of me, beneath my feet, a lake that, frozen fast, had lost the look of water and seemed glass. The Danube, where it flows in Austria, the dawn beneath this frozen sky, have never made for their course so thick a veil in winter as there was here, for had Mount Tambernic or Pietrapana's mountain crashed upon it, not even at the edge would it have creaked. And as the croaking frog sits with its muzzle above the water, in the season when the peasant woman often dreams of gleaning, So, livid in the ice up to the place where the shame can show itself, were those sad shades, whose teeth were chattering with notes like storks. Each kept his face bent downward steadily. Their mouths bore witness to the cold they felt, just as their eyes proclaimed their sorry hearts. When I had looked around a while, my eyes turned towards my feet, and I saw two locked so close, their hair upon their heads that intermingled. "Do tell me, you whose chests are pressed so tight," I said. "Who are you?" They bent back their necks, and when they lifted up their faces toward me, their eyes, which wept upon the ground before, shed tears down their lips until the cold held fast the tears and locked their lids still more. No clamp had ever fastened plank to plank so tightly, and because of this, they butted each other like two rams. Such was their fury. And one from whom the cold had taken both his ears, who kept his face bent low, then said, "Why do you keep on staring so at us? If you would like to know who these two are, that valley where Vicenzio descends belonged to them, and to their father, Alberto. They came out of one body, and you can search all Caina, you'll never find a shade more fit to sit within this ice. Not him who, at one blow, had chest and shadow shattered by Arthur's hand, and not Focaccia, and not this sinner here, who so impedes my vision with his hand, I can't see past him. Oh Lord. His name was Sasciol Mascheroni. If you're Tuscan, now you know who he has been. Unless you keep me talking any longer. Know that I was Camision de Pazzi. I'm waiting for Carlino to absolve me. And after I saw 1,000 faces made dog-like by the cold for which I shudder, and always will when I face frozen fords. And while we were advancing towards the center to which all weight is drawn, I, shivering in that eternally cold shadow, I know not if it was will or destiny or chance, but as I walked among the heads, I struck my foot hard in the face of one. Weeping, he chided then, "Why trample me? If you've not come to add to the revenge of Montepardi, why do you molest me?" And I, "My master, now wait here for me, that I may clear up just one doubt about him. Then you can make me hurry as you will." My guide stood fast, and I went on to ask of him, who was still cursing bitterly, "Who are you that rebukes another so? And who are you to go through Anatora, striking the cheeks of other?" He replied, "Too roughly, even if you were alive." "I am alive, and can be precious to you if you want fame," was my reply, "for I can set your name among my other notes." And he to me, "I want the contrary, so go away and do not harass me. Your flattery is useless in this valley." And I grabbed him by the scruff and said, "You'll have to name yourself to me, or else you won't even have one hair left upon it. Tell me your name, or I'm going to pluck you bald." And he said to me, "Though you should strip me bald, I shall not tell you who I am, or show it. Not if you pound my head 1,000 times." His hairs were round around my head already, and I had plucked from him more than one tuft, while he was barking. His eyes stared down. When someone else cried out, "What is it, Boca? Isn't the music of your jaws enough for you without your bark? What devil's at you?" And now, I said, "You traitor bent on evil, I do not need your talk, for I shall carry the true news of you, and that will bring you shame." "Be off," he answered. "Tell them what you like, but don't be silent. If you make it back about the one whose tongue was now so quick. Here he laments the silver of the Frenchman. I say, you then can say him of Dura, down there where all the sinners are kept cool. And if you're asked who else was in here in the ice, one of them is the Becerra is beside you. He had his gullet sliced right through by Florence. Gianni de Soldanieri, I believe. lies there with Ganelon, and Tebadelo. He was Fane's while it slept. We had already taken leave of him when I saw two shades frozen in one hole, so that one's head severed served as the other's cap. And just as he who's hungry chews at his bread, one sinner dug his teeth into the other, right at the place where brain is joined to nape. No differently had Titius gnawed at the temples of Menelaus out of indignation. Then this one chewed the skull and other parts. O you who show with such a bestial sign your hatred for the one on whom you feed, tell me the cause, I said. We can agree that if your quarrel with him is justified, then knowing who you are and with what's his sin, I shall repay you yet on earth above. If that with which I speak does not dry up. Only two more of these. One sec, gotta protect my throat and hydrate. Canto 33, Inferno. That sinner raised his mouth from his fierce meal, then used the head that he ripped apart and back. He wiped his lips upon its hair. Then he began, You want me to renew despairing pain that presses at my heart, even as I think back before I speak. But if my words are seed from which the fruit is infamy for this betrayer whom I know, you'll see me speak and weep at once. I do not know who you are or in what way you've come down here, and yet you surely seem, from what I hear, to be a Florentine. You are to know how was Count Ugolino, and this one here, Archbishop Ruggieri. And now I tell you why I am his neighbor. There is no need to tell you that, because of his malicious tricks, I was first taken and then was killed, since I had trusted him. However, that which you cannot have heard, that is, the cruel death devised for me, you now shall hear and know if he has wronged me. A narrow window in the Ingles Tower, which now, through me, is called the Hunger Tower, a cage in which still others will be locked, had, through its opening, already showed me several moons, when I had dreamed that bad dream which rent the curtain of the future for me. This man appeared to me as lord and master. He hunted down the wolf and his young whelps upon the mountain that prevents the Pisans from seeking Luca. And with lean and keen and practiced hounds, he'd sent up front before him Gualandi and Sismondi and Lanfranchi. But after a brief course, it seemed to me that both the father and the sons were weary. I seemed to see the flanks torn apart by sharp fangs. When I awoke at daybreak, I could hear my sons, who were together there with me, weeping within their sleep, asking for bread. You would be cruel indeed if, thinking what my heart foresaw, you don't already grieve. And if you don't weep now, when would you weep? They were awake by now. The hour drew near, at which our food was usually brought, and each, because of what he had dreamed, was anxious. Below, I heard them nailing up the door of that appalling tower without a word. I looked into the faces of my sons. I did not weep. Within, I had turned to stone. They wept. So my poor little Anselm said, Father, you look so... What is wrong with you? At that I shed no tears, and all day long and through the night that followed did not answer till another sun had touched the world. As soon as a thin ray had made its way into that sorry prison, and I saw, reflected in 4 faces, my own gaze. Out of my grief I bit at both my hands, and they, who thought I'd done that out of hunger, immediately rose and told me, "Father, it would be far less painful for us if you ate us, for you clothed us in this sad flesh it is for you to strip it off." Then I grew calm, to keep them from more sadness. Through that day and the next, we all were silent. Oh, hard earth, why did you not open up? But after we had reached that 4th day, Gato, throwing himself outstretched down at my feet, implored me, "Father, why do you not help me?" And there he died. Just as you see me, I saw the other 3 fall one by one, between the 5th day and the 6th, at which, now blind, I started groping over each, and after they were dead, I called them for 2 days. Then fasting had more force than grief. When he had spoken this, with eyes awry, again he gripped that sad skull in his teeth, which, like a dog's, were strong down to the bone. "Ah, Pisa, you the scandal of the peoples of that fair land where sea is heard, because your neighbors are slow to punish you, may then Caprara, and Gorgona move and build a hedge across the Arno's mouth, so that it may drown every soul in you. For if Count Ugolino was reputed to have betrayed your fortresses, there was no need to have his sons endure such torment. O Thebes renewed, their years were innocent and young. Rigata, Uguisione, and the other 2 my song has named above, we passed beyond, where frozen water wraps a rugged covering still other sinners who are not bent, but flat upon their backs. Their very weeping there won't let them weep, and grief that finds a barrier in their eyes turns inward to increase their agony. Because their first tears freeze into a cluster, and, like a crystal visor, fill up all the hollow that is underneath the eyebrow. And though, because of cold, my every sense had left its dwelling in my face, just as a callus had no feeling. Nonetheless, I seemed to feel some wind now, and I said, "My master, who has set this gust in motion? For isn't every vapor quenched down here?" And he said to me, "You soon shall be where your own eye will answer that, when you shall see the reason why this wind blasts from above." And one of those sad sinners in the cold crust cried to us, "O souls who are so cruel that this last place had been assigned to you, take off the hard veils from my face so that I can release the suffering that fills my heart before the lament freezes again." To which I answered, "If you'd have me help you, then tell me who you are. If I don't free you, may I go to the bottom of the ice?" He answered them, I am Fra Albergio, the one who tended fruits in a bad garden, and here my figs have been repaid with dates." "But then," I said, "are you already dead?" And he to me, "I have no knowledge of my body's fate within the world above, for Ptolemaea had this privilege. Quite frequently the soul falls here before it has been thrust away by Atropos. And that you may, with much more willingness, scrape these glazed tears off from my face, know this. As soon as my soul becomes a traitor, as I was, then a demon takes my body away, and keeps that body in his power until its years have run their course completely. Their soul falls headlong down into the cistern, and up above, perhaps there still appears the body of the shade that winters here, behind me. You must know him, if you just come down here. He is Sir Brancadoria. For many years it has been thus pent up. I said to him, I think that you deceive me, for Brancadoria is not yet dead. He eats and drinks and sleeps and puts on clothes. There in the Malabrance's ditch above where sticky pitch boils up. Michel Zanche had still not come, he said to me, when this one, together with a kinsman who had done this treachery together, left a devil in his stead inside his body. And now reach out your hand, open my eyes, and yet I did not open them for him, and it was courtesy to show him rudeness. Ah, Genoese, a people strange to every constraint of custom, full of all corruption, why have you not been driven from this world? For with the foulest spirit of Romagna, I found one of you, such that, for his acts, in soul he bathes already in coctus, and up above he appears alive, body. Canto 34, Inferno. Vexilla regis produent inferni, towards us, and therefore keep your eyes ahead, my master said, to see if you can spy him. Just as when night falls on our hemisphere, or when a heavy fog is blowing thick, a windmill seems to wheel when it seems far off. So then, I seemed to see that sort of structure. And next, because the wind was strong, I shrank behind my guide. There was no other shelter. And now, with fear, I set it down in meter. I was where all shades were fully covered, but visible as wisps of straw in glass. There, some lie flat, and others stand erect. One on his head, and one upon his soles. Excuse me. And some bend face to feet, just like a bow. But after we had made our way ahead, my master felt he now should have me see that creature who was once a handsome presence. He stepped aside and made me stop and said, "Look. Here is Diz, and this the place where you will have to arm yourself with fortitude." O reader, do not ask of me how I grew faint and frozen, then I cannot write it. All words would fall far short of what it was. I did not die, and I was not alive. Think for yourself, if you have any wit, what I became, deprived of life and death. The emperor of that despondent kingdom so towered up from the ice, up from the mid-chest, that I match better with a giant's breath than giants match the measure of his arms. Now you can gauge the size of all of him, if it is in proportion to such parts. If he was once as handsome as he now is ugly, and despite that raised his brows against his maker, one can understand how every sorrow has a source in him. I marveled when I saw that on his head he had 3 faces, one in front, blood red, and then another 2 just above the midpoint of each shoulder joined the first, and at the crown all 3 were reattached. The right looked somewhat yellow, somewhat white. The left in its appearance was like those who come from where the Nile descending flows. Beneath each face of his, 2 wings spread out, as broad as suited so immense a bird. I had never seen a ship with sails so wide. They had no feathers, but were fashioned like a bat's, and he was agitating them, so that 3 winds made their way out from him. And all Coctus froze before these winds. He wept out of 6 eyes and down 3 chins. Tears gushed together with a bloody froth. Within each mouth he used it like a grinder. With gnashing teeth he tore to bits a sinner, so that he brought much pain to 3 at once. The forward sinner found that biting nothing when matched against the clawing, for at times his back was stripped completely of its hide. That soul up there who has to suffer most, my master said. Judas Iscariot. His head inside. He jerks his legs without. Of those two others, with their heads beneath, the one who hangs from the black snout is Brutus. See how he writhes and does not say a word. The other, who seems so robust, is Cassius. But night has come again, and it is time for us to leave. We have seen everything. Just as he had asked, I clasped him around the neck, and he watched for the chance of time and peace, time and place, and when the wings were open wide enough. He took fast hold upon the shaggy flanks, and then descended, down from tuft to tuft, between the tangled hair and icy crusts. When we had reached the point at which the thigh revolves, just at the swelling of the hip, my guide, with heavy strain and rugged work, reversed his head to where his legs had been and grappled onto the hair, as one who climbs. I thought that we were going back to hell. Hold tight, my master said. He panted like a man exhausted. It is by such stairs that we must take our leave of so much evil. Then he slipped through a crevice in a rock and placed me on the edge of it to sit. That done, he climbed towards me with steady steps. I raised my eyes, believing I should see the half of Lucifer that I had left. Instead, I saw him with his legs turned up. And if I then become perplexed, do let the ignorant be judges, those who cannot understand what point I had just crossed. Get up, my master said. Be on your feet. The way is long, the path is difficult. The sun's already back to middle tiers. There was no palace hall. The place in which we found ourselves, but with its rough-hewn floor and scanty light, a dungeon built by nature. Before I freed myself from this abyss, master, I said when I stood up straight, tell me enough to see I don't mistake. Where is the ice? And how is he so placed head downward? Tell me, too, how has the sun in so few hours gone from night to morning? And he said to me, you still believe you are north of the center, where I grasped the hair of the damned worm who pierces through the world. And you were there as long as I descended. But when I turned, that's when you passed the point to which from every part all weights are drawn. And now you stand beneath the hemisphere, opposing that which cloaks the dry lands, and underneath whose zenith died the man, whose birth and life were sinless in this world. Your feet are placed upon a little sphere that forms the other face of the Judeca. Here it is morning, when it is evening there. And he whose hair has served as a ladder is still fixed, even as he was before. This was the side on which he fell from heaven. For fear of him, the land that once loomed here, made of the sea of veil, rose into our hemisphere. That land which appears upon this side, perhaps to flee from him, left here this hollow space and hurried upward. There is a place below, the limit of that cave, its farthest point from Beelzebub. A place one cannot see. It is discovered by ear. There is a sounding stream that flows along the hollow of a rock eroded by winding waters. And the slope is easy. My guide and I came on that hidden road to make our way back into the bright world, and with no care for any rest, we climbed he first. I following until I saw, through a round opening, some of those things of beauty heaven bears. It was from there that we emerged, to see, once more, the stars. And that's how Inferno ends, everybody. We have escaped hell.